Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding a fantasy-themed football simulation. More specifically, I'd like to talk about the level of detail that I've decided to have in terms of individual matches. So, when you have a sports-themed game, there's a spectrum of how much detail am I going to give the player. So at one extreme, you might try to simulate everything that happens in an individual game. So you might have, let's say it's a baseball simulation, you might say, right, first pitch, let's say you're the fielding team. What sort of pitch are you going to what sort of pitch are you going to offer up, and then you roll on a chart based on the stats of the batter and the stats of the pitcher and what you've chosen, and you say, right, that was a strike, great. Second ball, what are we going to do? And you roll on another chart, and so you're simulating every single thing that happens. If they hit it, then you say, right, where does it go? Okay, we'll which fielder is in that position, and etc. etc. You roll to see if the throw to the base is caught, and so on. And so at the end of that, you've got sort of every detail of a single match. Or you might have a game which simulates a season or more. Might be playing 30 games or something, and you might go, well, gee, simulating every detail of 30 matches is going to be too much. So you might go to the other extreme and say, right, well, my pitching score is this, their batters are this, this, and this, and so we'll just sort of roll for each batter, or even just roll for their team as a whole based on those two stats to see how many home runs they got, and then I'll do the same thing to see how many home runs I got, and that's the result of the game. And then we might have an extra roll to see if anyone got some sort of penalty or suspension for cheating or something. And then we might roll to see if anyone got injured during the game. And that's the game. And then you just move on to what you're doing before the next game. I've decided to sort of be in between those two extremes. The player will get sort of play-by-play detail in parts of the game, but then other parts of it, in parts of the match, but then a lot of it will be skipped over. And the way that it's skipped over, the way that we decide what happens in the bits that are skipped over, is we just assume that the same thing will happen as happened in the detailed part. So let me give you an example. So at the moment, I'm thinking about basing the game mostly on American football. And the way American football works is that you have 4 attempts, which are called downs, to advance the ball 10 yards, which is about the same as 10 metres. And if you succeed in that, you get another 4 downs. If you don't, there's a turnover. The other team gets the same opportunity. So what we do is we have a team which will start on the offense, and that might be the player team. It might be the computer-controlled team. And that team gets 4 attempts to move the ball, and in that part of the game, we simulate the details. And I've decided to call them the detailed bit the highlights, and the bits that we're sort of skipping past regular play. So during the highlights, let's say that the human player is on the offense. The human player says they have a list of options. Okay, I'm going to try a long pass, let's say. And the computer says, the computer-controlled player decides what it's going to sort of defend against. And let's say it turns out, well, the computer-controlled player thought you were going to try a running play, and so they're unprepared for what you've done, and so you get a slight advantage. And it tells you, right, such and such is in the open. You try to pass to them, but your pass was inaccurate, which might depend on your dexterity and the distance, how far away they are. And therefore, it's what's called an incomplete pass. And so you don't advance any further. And then you say, all right, the second down, I'm going to try a running play, and then it'll tell you what happens there. So you're seeing the game in sort of great detail. And let's say you move the ball 15 yards in 3 downs. So in other words, you're successful. Well, then the game it's not going to make you simulate the subsequent downs. It's just going to say, okay, well, we'll just assume they move another 15 yards in another 3 downs. And then we'll assume they move another 15 yards in another 3 downs, and so on. And it'll just skip past that, assuming that on average you'll move about 15 yards. That maybe there'll be a random factor, so you might move, instead of 15, it might be 12 to 18, something like that. But either way, it just skips past that. So it'll only be a second and it'll say, right, it's now 12 downs later and you've moved 45 yards. And it takes up the game from there. So when does it drop out of that regular play back into detailed play? How does it know when to do that? Well, it will stop assuming what happens if that would lead you to score, or the other team to score, or it would leave too few downs in the current quarter. An American football game's divided into quarters. So it might come back with, okay, you're now 3 yards out, and now you've got to start deciding what you're going to do. Are you going to try and run it in? Are you going to pass to someone else? Are you going to try and kick for a field goal? And there might be sort of specific trick plays that you can try that you've learnt in the course of the game, and then it tells you what happens again. So it's kind of like watching the highlights on TV, right? They start by saying, well, here's what happened at the beginning. Here's when this team nearly scored or did score, and here's what happened at the end of the quarter, because often in American football and in lots of other sports and in lots of other games in general, if it's near the end of the game, you might as well try something desperate. If you're not winning, like if you're 20 yards out and you've got one attempt to get that 20 yards, you might try a sort of desperate play that seldom works, but when it does works spectacularly. Or you might as well try to kick for a field goal, or you might as well sort of try to do something a bit out of the ordinary. And so the idea is that it will give you a sort of a feel for the game. It won't just go, here's the results of the game, right? It won't be just rolling on a couple of charts to tell you what happens. It will give you the feeling of playing through the game, but it will sort of skip past the boring bits, I guess. I'll give you a couple of other sort of just examples of how the math works. So that I gave you an example of if you succeeded in moving the ball 15 yards in 3 downs. The same thing, of course, would happen if the computer-controlled player did that. Let's say one team advances the ball 8 yards in 4 downs, which is failure because the target is 10 yards in at least 4 downs, or 4 downs or less. And then the other team advances the ball 12 yards in 3 downs. Well, it would then assume, okay, Team B is going to keep going 12 yards every 3 downs. So the same thing happens. It then says, right, it's 10 down. Well, I wouldn't say 10 downs later because it'd be set to 3 in this case. So it might say, okay, it's 16 downs later. It's this particular section of the game. Although an American football game isn't actually measured in downs. They don't have a set number of downs. It's actually a set amount of time. But either way, it might say, righto, there's 3 minutes on the clock, and now the opposing team is 5 yards out from your. I can't remember what they call the line where they score a touchdown. Sorry, I don't know American football very well. I know what it's called in other versions of the game, but yeah. So, or of course, you might not advance it. Like, not both teams might fail, in which case it looks at the total. So let's say Team A goes 8 yards in 4 downs, and then Team B goes 6 yards in 4 downs. Well, the total is that the ball has moved 2 yards. That's wrong. That's Team A's advantage. Sorry, to Team A's advantage in 8 downs, and so it just assumes that that's going to happen every 8 downs, meaning the ball isn't going to sort of move very much until probably towards the end of the game. So that's how it works. It's obviously not. It's sacrificing realism because, of course, you can't assume that every set of 4 downs is going to be the same as the one before, but it does. It sort of saves time and hopefully gives you the more interesting bits of the game, I guess. And because this isn't a simulation of a single game, it's a simulation of a whole season. It feels like we've sort of got to cut down something. You want to skip past some things, but I still wanted to sort of have a certain feeling of you're actually playing the game. You're actually making sort of in-game, in-match decisions. When I say game, I mean the individual match, not the computer game. I still want to have the feeling of you are actually making decisions about whether that you're going to pass or whether you're going to run or whatever. And whether it's too much or too little detail, well, of course, we've got to program it and play it and see. But as always, it's a starting point, and we'll see what happens. So that's what I've decided. That's what I've been doing in the last few days. When I come back, I will still be in this document. I'm still not sort of ready to start programming. Excuse me. And we'll talk about what I've done then. Until then, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.